Now let's begin. Gordon Tompkins had learned to trust his instincts over the years. They'd served him well during his decade as an investigative journalist before he transitioned to freelance work, and they were screaming at him now as he sat in his home office, reviewing financial discrepancies that shouldn't exist. But the phone call interrupted everything. "Mr. Tompkins? This is Memorial General Hospital. Your son has been admitted to the ICU. Your mother-in-law brought him in about 20 minutes ago." The world tilted. Gordon's coffee mug slipped from his hand, splattering across his keyboard. What happened? "Sir, I can't discuss details over the phone. You need to come immediately. Room 304 in the pediatric ICU." Gordon was already moving, grabbing his keys, his mind racing through impossible scenarios. Sam had been fine that morning. Perfect health. He'd dropped him at school himself, watched him run toward the entrance with his backpack bouncing. How could Lorraine have picked him up? She didn't even have permission. The 15-minute drive took 8. Gordon abandoned his car in a no-parking zone and sprinted through the hospital corridors, his journalist's brain cataloging details even through his panic. The fluorescent lights, the antiseptic smell, the way people stepped aside from a running man with wild eyes. Room 304. He burst through the door. A boy lay in the bed, small and pale, connected to monitors that beeped with mechanical precision. Same age as Sam, 8 years old. Same sandy brown hair. Similar build. But the face was wrong. The nose too narrow. The chin different. "This isn't him," Gordon said, his voice hollow. The attending physician, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and graying hair pulled back severely, looked up from her tablet. "Excuse me. This isn't my son." Gordon pulled out his phone with shaking hands, showing her Sam's photo from that morning, grinning gap-toothed at the camera, holding up a crayon drawing of their dog. "This isn't him." Dr. Helen Guerrero's face went from confused to professionally blank in seconds. "Mr. Tompkins, your mother-in-law was quite clear. Where is she? She left about 10 minutes ago. Said she needed to get something from her car." The doctor's tone shifted, sharpening with concern. "Sir, if this child isn't your son, then we have a serious problem. Hospital security has been trying to reach her, but..." Gordon was already dialing home, his hands steadier now that the initial panic had transformed into something colder, more familiar. The phone rang twice. "Dad," Sam's voice, bright and whole and alive. Gordon closed his eyes, relief flooding through him like a physical force. "Hey, buddy. You okay?" "Yeah? I'm doing homework. Are you coming home soon?" "Max wants dinner." Max, their golden retriever, operated on a schedule more precise than any Swiss watch. "Soon. Stay inside, okay? Lock the doors." "Dad, you're being weird." "Humor me, Sam. I'll explain later." Gordon turned back to Dr. Guerrero, who was now on her own phone, presumably with hospital security. He looked at the child in the bed, unconscious, breathing shallow, face bruised. What happened to him? Severe dehydration and malnutrition. Some older bruising consistent with, well, we've already called child services. The woman who brought him in claimed he'd collapsed at home. Something cold settled in Gordon's chest. He asked the question that would change everything. "When was the last time you saw my ex-mother-in-law? What was she wearing?" Dr. Guerrero described the outfit, details Gordon filed away, then frowned as Gordon pulled up his phone's photo gallery, flipping to a picture from 3 months ago at Sam's school play. "Is this her?" The doctor's frown deepened. "No. The woman who brought in this child was younger. Blonde. Late 30s maybe. Not Lorraine. Catherine. His ex-wife." Gordon's mind raced through implications, connections, the kind of pattern recognition that had made him a successful journalist. Catherine, who demanded joint custody in their divorce 2 years ago, but rarely used her scheduled time. Catherine, who'd moved 3 states away for a fresh start, but still called occasionally about money. Catherine, whose mother Lorraine had always enabled her worst impulses. And now a mystery child, brought to a hospital under false pretenses, using Gordon's son's identity. "I need to make a call," Gordon said, his voice calm in a way that would have warned anyone who knew him well. "Don't let anyone remove this child until we figure out who he belongs to." Outside the room, Gordon dialed a number he hadn't used in 6 months. It rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. "Tompkins, thought you'd given up on the investigative life." "Hey, Dan, I need a favor." Dan Walters had been Gordon's editor at the Tribune, now worked as a private investigator with connections throughout law enforcement. I need you to run a name through your databases. Fast and quiet. This for a story? This is personal. And it might get ugly. A pause. Give me the name. Catherine Bliss Tompkins. But also search for Catherine Bliss, any recent activity. And cross-reference with a Lorraine Bliss. Gordon gave him their known addresses, social security numbers he still had from divorce paperwork. What am I looking for? Gordon watched through the room's window as Dr. Guerrero examined the unconscious child. I don't know yet. But my ex-wife just tried to admit someone else's kid to a hospital using my son's name and insurance. I want to know why. Jesus. That's fraud at minimum. Yeah. And I'm guessing it's just the surface. Gordon had learned to trust his instincts. Right now they were telling him that whatever Catherine had been doing, whatever had led to this moment, was bigger and darker than simple insurance fraud. How fast can you work? Give me 2 hours. Where are you? Memorial General. I'll be here or at home with Sam. I'm not letting him out of my sight until I know what's happening. Gordon hung up and called his neighbor, Clint Sexton, a retired cop who occasionally watched Sam when Gordon traveled for work. Clint, I need you to do me a favor. Can you head over to my place? Sam's there alone and I'm stuck at the hospital. Everything okay? Not even close. I'll explain later. Just make sure he stays inside and nobody comes near the house until I get back. On my way. The pieces were moving into position, though Gordon couldn't yet see the full picture. He returned to room 304, where hospital security had arrived, 2 officers taking notes while Dr. Guerrero explained the situation. Gordon provided what details he could, careful and precise, his journalist training keeping his statement factual and clean. We've reviewed the security footage, one officer said, a young man named Rodriguez with sharp eyes. The woman who brought the child and wore a hat and sunglasses kept her face angled away from cameras. Professional-grade awareness. She signed in as Lorraine Bliss, but the signature doesn't match what we have on file from previous visits. So Catherine had impersonated her own mother. Why? Gordon's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Coffee shop on Morrison, 1 hour. Come alone. L. Lorraine. Gordon showed the message to Officer Rodriguez. That's my actual ex-mother-in-law. She wants to meet. Could be a trap. Probably is. Gordon smiled without humor. But she's going to tell me what I need to know. One way or another. The coffee shop was one of those aggressively hipster establishments with exposed brick and baristas who took their craft too seriously. Gordon arrived 15 minutes early, chose a table with clear sight lines to both exits, and ordered black coffee he didn't drink. Old habits. Lorraine Bliss appeared exactly on time, and Gordon felt a small shock at her appearance. She'd aged a decade in the 2 years since the divorce. Her carefully maintained blonde highlights had grown out to show gray roots, and her face had a hollowed quality that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. She sat across from him without ordering, clutching her purse like a life preserver. Where's Catherine? Gordon asked. I don't know. Lorraine's voice cracked. I haven't known where she really is for 8 months. Gordon waited. Silence was a journalist's best tool. People always rushed to fill it, and in their rush, they revealed truths they'd meant to hide. She remarried, Lorraine said finally. Last year. To a man named Edward Schwartz. He seemed nice at first. Stable job, good income. But then, she twisted her purse strap. Gordon, I think she's in trouble. Real trouble. Whose child is in that hospital bed, Lorraine? Her stepson. Edward's boy from his first marriage. His name is Ryan. Tears streaked Lorraine's carefully applied makeup. Edward got custody because the mother was deemed unfit. Drug problems. But Catherine, she wasn't ready to be a stepmother. She never wanted more children after Sam. Gordon's hands tightened on his coffee cup. Why did she bring him to the hospital using Sam's information? Because Edward has no insurance. He lost his job 3 months ago. Catherine called me, frantic. Ryan was sick, getting sicker. She didn't know what to do. She knew you still had Sam on your policy, and she thought. Lorraine's voice dropped to a whisper. She thought she could get Ryan treated using Sam's identity. Just this once. To save him. That's insurance fraud, identity theft, and child endangerment. I know. I told her it was insane. But she was desperate, and Edward was worse. He convinced her it would work, that nobody would check, that it was the only way. Lorraine reached across the table, her hand trembling. Gordon, please. I know what she did was wrong, but she's still Sam's mother. If this comes out, if she's arrested. Gordon pulled his hand away. Where are they now? I don't know. I swear. After she left the hospital, she called me from a burner phone. Said she was sorry. Said she'd fix it. Said she needed to disappear for a while until things calmed down. Things aren't going to calm down, Lorraine. There's a sick child in that hospital who's been neglected and possibly abused. Child Services is involved. The police are looking for Catherine. And you're now an accessory to everything she's done. Lorraine's face crumpled. What should I do? Gordon stood, leaving his untouched coffee. You should get a lawyer. A good one. And you should tell them everything. Where Catherine might go, who Edward really is, what they've been doing. Because here's what's going to happen. I'm going to find out the truth. All of it. And when I do, everyone involved in this is going to face exactly what they deserve. Gordon, please. Did you know Catherine was planning this? Did you help her get Sam's insurance information? The silence that followed told Gordon everything. He left Lorraine sitting alone in the coffee shop, her tears falling onto the reclaimed wood table, and walked out into the afternoon sun with his phone already to his ear. Dan, I need everything on an Edward Schwartz, married to Catherine Bliss within the last year. Employment history, criminal record, financial status, previous marriages, custody battles, everything. And I need it yesterday. Got something already on Catherine, Dan said. You're not going to like it. Tell me. She filed for bankruptcy 8 months ago, then withdrew the filing. Around the same time, she started making regular deposits to her account. 500 here, 1,000 there. Cash deposits. Untraceable. Gordon's investigative instincts crystallized around a new theory. What kind of bankruptcy was she filing? Chapter 7. Complete liquidation. She claimed zero assets and debt exceeding $200,000. Where did that debt come from? That's the interesting part. About 60% was from medical bills. But not for her or Sam. The billing codes don't match any procedures or treatments she'd need. They're pediatric oncology codes. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Gordon stopped walking, standing frozen on the sidewalk as pedestrians flowed around him. Ryan, he said. Edward's son. He's not just sick. He has cancer. That'd be my guess. And if Edward had no insurance when the kid got diagnosed, those bills would have piled up fast. Pediatric oncology can run into the hundreds of thousands. Gordon's mind raced through scenarios. Catherine marries Edward, inherits his son's medical debt through marriage. Files for bankruptcy but withdraws when she realizes it won't help. Medical debt isn't easily discharged, and it wouldn't stop the treatment from being needed. So she starts making cash deposits, probably from Edward working under the table somewhere. But it's not enough. It's never enough. So she looks for another solution. And she thinks of Sam, of the insurance policy Gordon maintains on him, of the identity that could be borrowed, just once, to save a dying child. Except Ryan doesn't just need one treatment. He needs ongoing care, chemotherapy, radiation, hospital stays, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of care. And Catherine doesn't have it. Neither does Edward. So what do? Dan, Gordon said slowly, I need you to check something else. See if there have been any other hospital admissions for a child matching Sam's description in the last 6 months. Different hospitals, different cities, but all using his information. You think she's been doing this for a while? I think she's been desperate for a while. And desperate people make patterns. Gordon started walking again, his pace faster now, purposeful. I also need you to find Edward Schwartz. Current location, known associates, anything that might tell me where they're hiding. On it. Gordon, what are you planning? I'm planning to protect my son and make sure these people face justice. That's not an answer. Gordon smiled grimly. It's the only one I've got right now. Call me when you have something. He hung up and checked his watch. For hours since the hospital called. For hours since his world had tilted into this nightmare. He needed to get home to Sam. Needed to make sure his son was safe. But first, he needed to make one more stop. Memorial General's administrative offices were located on the 3rd floor, accessed through a maze of corridors designed to discourage casual visitors. Gordon navigated them with the confidence of someone who belonged there, a trick he'd learned early in his journalism career. Act like you're supposed to be somewhere, and most people won't question it. The billing department was staffed by 3 women hunched over computers, the fluorescent lights casting their faces in harsh relief. Gordon approached the youngest, a woman in her 20s with kind eyes named Jamie Dale, according to her nameplate. Hi, I'm Gordon Tompkins. My son was admitted earlier today. Well, someone was admitted using his information. I need to see the billing records. Jamie's expression shifted from polite to guarded. Sir, I need authorization from. I'm not asking to change anything. I just need to see what's been charged to his account. It's my insurance. I have a right to know. She hesitated, then pulled up a screen. Just this one admission? Earlier today. No. I need to see all admissions under Samuel Tompkins for the last year. Jamie's fingers flew across the keyboard. Her eyes widened. Sir, there are 17 separate admissions here. Different hospitals across 3 states. All within the last 8 months. 17. Gordon felt fury crystallize in his chest, cold and sharp as diamond. Can you print that for me? This is highly irregular. Gordon leaned forward, his voice low and intense. Someone has been using my 8-year-old son's identity to commit insurance fraud. That child in room 304 isn't the first. He's just the first time they got caught. I need this information to give to the police and to press charges. Are you going to help me protect my son, or are you going to make me get a court order? Jamie printed the records. Gordon left the hospital with 17 pages documenting Catherine and Edward's systematic fraud. Chemotherapy treatments, radiation sessions, hospital admissions, emergency room visits, all charged to Sam's insurance, all using his identity, all adding up to a staggering total that would have triggered automatic fraud investigation if the treatments hadn't been spread across multiple hospitals in multiple states. They'd been smart about it. Careful, using Sam's real information but different hospitals, keeping the individual claims under investigation thresholds, spacing them out enough that no single institution would flag the pattern. But they'd gotten desperate. Ryan's condition must have worsened. They needed immediate treatment at a real hospital with a real ICU. So Catherine had taken the risk, brought him to Gordon's local hospital, and the whole scheme had unraveled. Gordon sat in his car, staring at the papers that documented his ex-wife's betrayal. Part of him understood. A sick child, crushing medical debt, desperation born of watching someone you love suffer. But understanding wasn't forgiveness. Not when it involved using Sam, risking his future insurability, his medical records, his identity. His phone rang. Dan. Found Edward Schwartz. And Gordon, you're going to want to sit down for this. I'm already sitting. Edward's a con man. Has been for 20 years. Real name is Edward Sterling. He's got priors in 3 states. Fraud, forgery, identity theft. Did time in Florida for running a social security scam targeting elderly widows. Got out 18 months ago. The world crystallized around a new, darker truth. He targeted Catherine. Looks like it. She was vulnerable after the divorce, probably lonely, definitely had access to resources through you. Alimony, child support, Sam's insurance. Edward would have seen her as a perfect mark. Does he even have a son? Oh, Ryan exists. He's Edward's nephew, not his son. The mother, Edward's sister, lost custody due to drug addiction like Lorraine said. But Edward never got legal custody. He took the kid anyway, probably saw an opportunity. Sick child equals sympathy, equals access to benefits and money. Gordon's hands tightened on the steering wheel. So Catherine thinks she married a decent guy who needs help with his sick son. She doesn't know he's a career criminal using both of them. Bingo. And here's the kicker. I found an apartment lease in Edward's real name. Place in Riverside, about 2 hours from you. Want me to check it out? No, Gordon said. I'll do it. Send me the address. Gordon, if Edward's there and he's as dangerous as his record suggests, then I'll call the cops before I go in. But I need to see this for myself. I need to know what we're dealing with. Gordon drove home first, found Sam safe with Clint on the couch watching a nature documentary about sharks. Max sprawled between them, tail thumping contentedly. Dad, Sam bounded over. Clint said you had an emergency. Is everything okay? Gordon pulled his son into a hug, breathing in the scent of his strawberry shampoo and the grape jelly he'd probably eaten after school. Everything's fine, buddy. Just some grown-up stuff I needed to handle. You've been good for Clint. He let me have ice cream. Clint shrugged unapologetically. Figured the kid could use a treat. You look like you've been through hell, Tompkins. Gordon gave Clint a brief rundown, enough to explain the danger without terrifying Sam. The retired cop's expression went from concerned to coldly furious. You need backup for what you're planning? I need you to stay here with Sam. If I'm not back in 4 hours, call this number. Gordon wrote down Detective Rodriguez's direct line. Tell them everything. Gordon, I'm not doing anything stupid. But I need to know what's real and what's a lie. And I can't do that from here. Sam was watching them with the too perceptive eyes of a child who'd learned early that adults sometimes kept scary secrets. Dad, are you going to be okay? Gordon knelt down to Sam's level. I promise you, I'm going to fix this. And when I do, you'll never have to worry about any of this again. Okay. Sam hugged him tight. Be careful. Always. The drive to Riverside gave Gordon time to think, to plan, to let the cold fury in his chest crystallize into something useful. He'd spent 10 years as an investigative journalist learning to see patterns, to connect dots, to find the truth buried under layers of deception. Those skills hadn't disappeared when he'd gone freelance. If anything, they'd sharpened. Edward Sterling, he couldn't think of the man as Schwartz anymore, had made a career out of exploiting vulnerable people. The elderly widows in Florida, and now Catherine. Probably others in between. Men like that didn't stop. They just found new targets, new schemes, new ways to take what didn't belong to them. But Edward had made a critical mistake. He'd involved Sam. And in doing so, he'd made an enemy of someone who knew how to destroy people with the truth. The apartment building was a decrepit low-rise in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. Gordon parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, his journalist's eye cataloging details. The broken security camera above the entrance, the mailboxes pried open, the stairwell that smelled of urine and desperation. Apartment 3C. Gordon stood outside the door, listening. Voices inside. Catherine's, high and stressed, and a male voice he didn't recognize, angry and demanding. He pulled out his phone, started the voice recorder, and knocked. The voices stopped. Footsteps approached. The door opened 6 inches, held by a chain lock. Edward Sterling stared out at him. Late 40s, handsome in a calculated way, eyes that shifted from charming to calculating in the space of a heartbeat. Can I help you? Hi, Edward. Or should I call you Sterling? I'm Gordon Tompkins. We need to talk about what you've been doing with my son's identity. Edward's face went carefully blank. I don't know what you're talking about. No? Because I've got 17 hospital admissions, all using Sam's insurance, all for a child who isn't him. I've got your criminal record under your real name. And I've got a very sick little boy in Memorial General's ICU who needs real help from people who aren't con artists. The door slammed shut. Gordon heard raised voices inside. Catherine's shock, Edward's commands, furniture scraping. He stepped back, phone already dialing. Detective Rodriguez? Gordon Tompkins. I'm at the apartment where my ex-wife and Edward Sterling are hiding. I need police here now, and I need child services. There's a pattern of fraud I can document, and... The door burst open. Edward lunged out, grabbing for Gordon's phone. But Gordon had been in worse situations, had interviewed gang members and corrupt politicians, and people who had every reason to hurt him. He'd learned to see violence coming. He sidestepped, let Edward's momentum carry him past, and drove his elbow into the man's kidney. Edward went down gasping. Don't, Gordon said quietly. You've done enough damage. Catherine appeared in the doorway, mascara streaking her face. Gordon, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You married a con artist who convinced you to commit insurance fraud using our son's identity. 17 times, Catherine. You put Sam's entire medical future at risk. You falsified records, committed identity theft, and when you got caught, you ran. Ryan was dying. Catherine's voice cracked. He needed treatment, and we had nothing. No money, no insurance, no options. So you stole from your own son? Gordon's voice was ice. You didn't come to me. You didn't ask for help. You didn't even tell me the truth. You committed crimes and dragged Sam into it. Edward said it would work. Edward's a career criminal. Gordon showed her the printout of Edward Sterling's record, watched her face crumble as she saw the truth. He used you, Catherine. He saw a vulnerable woman with access to resources, and he exploited you. And you let him. Sirens in the distance, growing closer. Edward tried to get up, but Gordon put a foot on his shoulder, keeping him down. Not violent, just firm. Just enough. It's over, Gordon said. Both of you are going to face charges. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to cooperate completely. You're going to document every fraudulent admission, every fake claim, every lie you told. And you're going to make sure Ryan gets real help from real people who know how to care for a sick child. And then what? Catherine whispered. We go to prison. That's up to the courts. But yes, probably. Sam needs his mother. Sam needs a mother who doesn't commit felonies and endanger him. Gordon's voice softened slightly. You could have come to me, Catherine, if you'd told me the truth, that you'd married someone, that there was a sick child who needed help. We could have figured something out. I'm not a monster. But instead, you lied. You stole. You put our son at risk. Police cars pulled up outside, filling the street with red and blue light. Detective Rodriguez appeared at the top of the stairs with 2 uniformed officers. Mr. Tompkins, you want to tell me what's happening here? Gordon stepped back, letting the officers handle Edward. I found the people who've been committing insurance fraud using my son's identity. I have documentation of 17 separate incidents across 8 months. And I have the sick child who needs proper care from proper authorities. The next hours were a blur of statements and documentation. Gordon handed over the billing records, explained the pattern, connected the dots. Catherine and Edward were arrested separately. She cooperative and broken, he defiant and calculating to the end. Ryan was transferred to a hospital with a proper pediatric oncology unit, and Child Services took temporary custody while they located his biological mother and assessed the situation. Through it all, Gordon remained calm, precise, methodical. The journalist's training serving him perfectly, document everything, verify every claim, build the case until it's airtight. By the time he got home, it was past midnight. Sam was asleep on the couch, Clint still watching over him. Max raised his head, tail wagging weakly. It's done, Gordon said quietly. Clint nodded. Good. The kid was worried about you. Gordon carefully lifted Sam, carried him to bed, tucked him in. Sam stirred, eyes opening halfway. Dad, I'm here, buddy. Everything's okay now. Promise. Promise. Sam's eyes closed again, trusting completely. Gordon watched him sleep for a long moment, then returned to the living room where Clint waited with 2 beers. You handled that well, Clint said. I protected my son. That's all that matters. Gordon accepted the beer, took a long drink. But it's not over. There's still more to this than insurance fraud. What do you mean? Gordon pulled out his phone, showed Clint the research Dan had sent over. Edward Sterling's full criminal history, associates, patterns of behavior. Edward's been doing this for 20 years. He doesn't stop with one con. He layers them, uses one victim to access another. Catherine was a stepping stone to something bigger. What could be bigger than insurance fraud? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Gordon's eyes hardened. Because men like Edward don't just run one scheme. They run multiple cons simultaneously, hedge their bets, always have an exit strategy. And I'm betting he had something else planned. Something involving Catherine's access to Sam. Clint leaned back, studying Gordon. You're not going to let this go, are you? Would you? No. But I'd be careful about crossing lines. You've got the law on your side now. Don't throw that away for revenge. Gordon smiled without humor. Who said anything about revenge? I'm a journalist. I find the truth and expose it. If that truth happens to destroy Edward Sterling completely, well, that's just good reporting. Over the next 3 days, Gordon dug deeper. Dan's investigation had uncovered layers of Edward's operations, shell companies, fake identities, a network of accomplices. But it was Gordon's own digging that uncovered the real bombshell. Edward had been planning to kidnap Sam. The evidence was buried in deleted emails recovered from Catherine's laptop, which police had seized as evidence, and which Gordon had legal access to review. Fragments of conversations where Edward suggested Sam should spend more time with them, where he researched custody laws, where he inquired about international travel requirements for children. But the clincher was a partially completed passport application in Sam's name, with a photo that wasn't Sam but a child who looked similar enough to pass casual inspection. The plan had been to take Sam on a vacation that would become permanent, moving to a country without extradition treaties, using Sam's identity and Gordon's financial resources to fund their escape. Catherine's responses in the email showed she'd resisted at first, then wavered, then been slowly convinced that Gordon was dangerous, that Sam would be better off away from him. Classic manipulation, isolating the victim from support systems, rewriting reality until the target couldn't distinguish truth from lies. Gordon sat in his office, reading these emails, feeling cold rage settle into his bones. Edward had been grooming Catherine to help kidnap Sam. The insurance fraud was just step 1, establishing medical records in multiple states that would make tracking them harder, creating a paper trail of legitimate reasons for Sam to be elsewhere. If the hospital mix-up hadn't exposed them, they would have kept going. And eventually, they would have taken his son. Gordon made copies of everything, organized it into a devastating chronological narrative, and sent it to Detective Rodriguez with a note. This is what they were really planning. The charges against Edward and Catherine expanded. Conspiracy to kidnap, child endangerment, wire fraud. The weight of evidence was overwhelming, and Catherine, realizing the full scope of Edward's manipulation, turned state's witness. Her testimony was damning. Edward had targeted her specifically, researched her background, known about Sam and Gordon's success as a journalist. He'd seen a vulnerable woman with access to a child and resources and built an elaborate con to exploit both. The trial took place 4 months later. Gordon sat in the courtroom every day, Sam safe at home with Clint, and watched as his ex-wife testified about the man she'd thought she loved, the lies she'd believed, the crimes she'd committed. Edward's defense tried to paint him as a desperate father figure trying to save a sick child. But Gordon's documentation, Catherine's testimony, and the recovered evidence of the kidnapping plot made that narrative impossible to sustain. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Edward Sterling was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Catherine, cooperating fully and showing genuine remorse, received 3 years with possibility of parole. She would lose custody of Sam permanently. Lorraine, who'd been charged as an accessory for providing Sam's insurance information, received probation and community service. She sold her house to help pay restitution. Ryan, the child at the center of the tragedy, was placed with his biological mother after she completed rehab. A cancer charity Gordon anonymously contacted covered his treatment costs. Last Gordon heard, the boy was responding well to proper medical care. But Gordon wasn't finished. He'd spent 4 months investigating Edward's network, connecting dots, finding other victims. The pattern was always the same. Find vulnerable people, exploit their situations, layer crimes until the victims were complicit and couldn't escape without implicating themselves. Gordon wrote a series of investigative articles documenting the whole operation. Names, dates, methods, evidence. He published them through his old newspaper connections, and they went viral. Other victims came forward. More charges were filed. Edward's sentence was extended to 25 years as the full scope of his crimes became clear. But the final piece of Gordon's plan was more personal. He sued Catherine and Edward for damages, emotional distress, identity theft, fraud. The lawsuit wasn't about money. It was about creating a public record of what they'd done, forcing every detail into the light where it couldn't be hidden or minimized. The judgment awarded Gordon full custody of Sam, which he already had, restitution for legal fees and therapy costs, and a permanent restraining order keeping both Edward and Catherine away from Sam until he turned 18. More importantly, Gordon ensured that every news outlet covering the trial had access to the full story, not just the crimes, but the manipulation, the exploitation, the systematic targeting of vulnerable people. Edward Sterling's face became synonymous with the worst kind of predatory con artist. 1 year after the hospital called about a child who wasn't his son, Gordon sat in his home office while Sam did homework at the kitchen table. Max dozed at Sam's feet. The house was quiet, peaceful, safe. Dan called to check in, as he did weekly. Saw your latest article got picked up by the national papers. Another victim came forward from the Florida case. Good, Gordon said. Every piece of evidence makes the case stronger. Make sure Edward never gets out early on good behavior. You've done more than enough, Gordon. You could let this go now. I will. Eventually. Gordon looked at a photo on his desk. Him and Sam at the park, both grinning at the camera, Max's tail visible at the edge of the frame. But every victim who comes forward, every crime that gets documented, every day Edward spends in prison, that's one less person he can hurt. One less family he can destroy. You're a good man, Tompkins. I'm a father who protected his son. Nothing more. But that wasn't quite true, and Gordon knew it. He'd done more than protect Sam. He'd systematically dismantled Edward Sterling's entire operation, exposed every crime, helped every victim, and ensured the man would never hurt another vulnerable person. He'd used every skill he developed as a journalist: research, investigation, documentation, publication. He'd connected dots, found patterns, built cases. And he'd done it all within the law, using truth as his weapon. Edward Sterling had made a career out of exploiting the vulnerable. Gordon had ended that career permanently, not through violence or revenge, but through exposure. The truth, properly documented and widely disseminated, had been more devastating than any physical retaliation could have been. Sam appeared in the doorway. "Dad, I'm stuck on this math problem." Gordon smiled, closing his laptop. "Let's take a look." They bent over the homework together, Gordon explaining the concept, while Sam's face screwed up in concentration. Max wandered over, resting his head on Gordon's knee. This was what mattered. Not the trial or the articles or Edward's prison sentence. Just this, a safe home, a healthy son, a quiet evening. The simple things Edward had tried to destroy. Later that night, after Sam was asleep, Gordon received an email from the prosecutor handling a related case in Florida. Another victim had come forward with evidence of a separate scheme Edward had run years ago. Did Gordon have time to review the documentation? He did. He always would. Because men like Edward Sterling thrived in shadows, in silence, in the spaces where their victims were too afraid or too ashamed to speak. Gordon had chosen to shine a light into those shadows. And he wouldn't stop until every dark corner was exposed, every victim had justice, and every predator like Edward was locked away where they could never hurt anyone again. He typed his response, offering to help however he could, then closed the laptop and checked on Sam one last time. His son slept peacefully, safe and secure, dreaming whatever 8-year-olds dreamed about. Gordon stood in the doorway watching him, feeling the weight of the past year settle into something bearable. The hospital call that had started everything, the panic, the discovery, the investigation, had led him down a dark path. But he'd walked it without compromising himself, without becoming the kind of man who solved problems through violence or revenge. He'd been smart, strategic, patient. He'd used his skills and his mind to outthink and outmaneuver people who'd made a career of deception. And in doing so, he'd protected not just Sam, but dozens of other potential victims who would never know how close they'd come to being Edward's next targets. The victory felt earned. Hard won. Complete. Tomorrow he'd continue his work, helping prosecutors, supporting victims, writing articles that kept the story alive and prevented it from being forgotten. But tonight, he was just a father watching his son sleep, grateful for second chances and the power of truth. Max padded into Sam's room, circled 3 times, and settled onto the floor beside the bed. Guardian and companion, patient and loyal. Gordon smiled, closed the door quietly, and returned to his office. He had work to do, victims to help, truth to expose. And he had all the time in the world. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.